Hello, everybody. Back again with another episode of Why Do You Call Bolivar Home? And today I'm in the living room of Ken Bruce. And Ken, I've heard a lot about you. This is the first time we've ever met, right? Can you say
Right,
this is not scripted?
right.
Right. Right. Ken is also going, I'm not 100% sure what we're going to talk about, but I think we have a good idea. We're going to try to cover a lot of ground. And I know that ever since I put on Facebook that I was going to be talking to you, I've had people coming out of the woodwork telling me Ken Bruce stories, and a lot of them have to do with the penguin, like we talked about. But you've lived a life, had a lot of experiences, and maybe just to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself. If you were introducing yourself, what would you say?
Well, I was born out in Aldridge, Missouri. My folks lived out on the farm, so they tell me I was born at home
Yeah.
and raised up around Aldridge, and then my folks eventually moved into Polk County
Okay.
on the farm. So I'm just a farm boy. So
Yeah. What was the day to day like on the farm? What did you farm?
well, we had a little bit of everything. We typical farm chickens. My mom, she'd have guineas, she had turkeys, maybe two different kinds of chickens. I mean, we had hogs, sheep, milk cows, work horses, uh, had a couple of wolfhounds.
Oh.
That's about what went on around the farm, you know.
What were you responsible for?
Well, there was three of us boys in the family, and we was big enough to do anything at all. Dad had us doing it. Like when I was 6 years old, I could sit down and milk cow.
Okay. Did you
And
enjoy that?
I had so many, I had to milk three out of the herd, and yeah, I enjoyed doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. What were some of the other things you enjoyed doing, I guess, on the farm or that
Well, there was lots of things to do. You had all that kind of livestock and stuff, you know. And Dad was good. He worked us boys,
Yeah.
and it didn't take him long to teach us what we were supposed to do and get it done.
Yeah.
So it was always plenty to do.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why you have so many boys. So
Yeah.
you can,
Right.
Those are farm hands.
That's right.
Was it
right.
just the three boys there? Did you have any sisters or?
Well, later on in life, I had twin sisters,
Okay.
identical twins.
Wow.
And so, yeah, we lived out on the farm then, but then was raised out here on T Highway mostly between Bolivar and Aldridge.
Yeah.
And so that made a pretty good sized family, you know.
Yeah. How far out were you?
Well, we lived all the way from 3 or 4 miles out between there and Aldridge.
Okay.
My dad worked on it. He farmed quite a bit, would rent farms from
Yeah.
neighboring, and rent land and farm it.
Yeah.
Maybe from where we lived, go down the road a house or two and have a patch of corn or something there. Rented, so a lot of going on. Needed a lot of boy help.
Where'd you go to school?
Oak Grove 70.
Oak Grove 70. This is a new one. I haven't heard this one yet. I've heard a lot of. Where was that?
Was out here on T Highway. Of course, I don't know if you know where Martin Porter lives now.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, that would be about, I guess, 4 miles from here out there. Of course, it's tore down now. That's where
Okay.
the school was.
Okay.
And yeah,
That it's interesting. As I've been having these conversations with folks, I've heard of schools I had not heard of. Donald Roberts went to Wilmington, and I've heard of the Mitchell School. Of course, North Ward is now a museum, but South Ward is now a Mexican restaurant.
Yeah,
and
right.
it's not there anymore. And so I like the history of
Yeah.
that too. So you went all through school. So
Yeah.
maybe pick it up from there. What'd you do after you graduated?
Well, of course, then went there. Then, of course, stayed on the farm. Of course, went to Bolivar High School.
Yeah.
But like I say, we always milked a lot of cows, and so and when I started to high school, I didn't ever play any sports like basketball or football because I had so many chores to do at home, and my folks never did go to ball games or any of us boys, you know, with and back farming like that. They didn't have time for that. So we had, when school was out, we'd get on a school bus, they'd kick us off. We went in about 10 minutes, we was on a pair of overhauls, and we was starting chores. We all had things we had to do, and we didn't have to be told to do it. We just know it was supposed to be done and got at it, you know.
That's a lost art, it seems like nowadays. We have, my wife and I, we have 5 kids. Which we don't live on a farm, we live in a subdivision, and having that work ethic there is something to, you know, it's important to instill, but boy, it seems like they forget and have to be told, but different time, wasn't it? So I've heard snippets about you, and we can talk about whatever you would like. So I've heard about, so Ken Bruce, the surveyor, Ken Bruce, the veteran, Ken Bruce, the penguin owner, Ken Bruce, the part of the Saddle Club. I mean, there's many different things. So maybe take me through a timeline after you graduated.
Okay. Well, way back then, they didn't have electric out in the county. And the REA come out, had ad in the paper that we knew that they were in the process going to start building these lines out. Well, they was wanting to hire some help now, and so a bunch of us boys, we country boys, we thought, well, they're wanting you to cut brush, these fence rows, you know, we could do that. So we just met out there, a bunch of us. I know there were several of us around. I knew about all of them, and the guy come out, and I remember a well-dressed gentleman. He said, introduce himself. He said, I'm Jim Goodrun, and I'm from Horton Engineering Company, Lamar. And my company has the contract with the REA to survey these lines. And I don't have a crew. And I'm here to hire some help. And since we're all standing around, and all farm boys there looking about the best I remember, said, but I've got to put a survey crew together, and I've got to have 4 or 5 men. Well, of course, we was lost. So he made a talk there about what we'd be doing, and he said, do any of you know how to run a transit? Well, we all just kind of looked around, and I finally said, well, I know what one is. And you're hired. He said you step over here. Well, he went through all the rest of it, what he needed, a chainman and the guy to do the book work and everything. Put it together, and he said, so he picked out the bunch he wanted. And so it was all news to us. So we said, we're going to go out here in the back lot and have a little schooling for about a week. And so, you know, he had a transit in his car. And I'd seen my dad set up a level. He was kind of done the carpenter work. So I know you had to get it level, and that's about it. So he got that out, and he gave me a book with the transit, and I studied the book, how to set it up and level it and figure it out. And I could figure the transit out because I had gone after I got out of service. I had the little experience with the slide rule as a kid, so I kind of knew how to start. You know, so I learned that transit. Well, that was my job as far as doing the surveying, was to keep the line straight, and making turning angles. And Lee Round was the guy that done the book work. He was good at figures and good draftsman. And he stood. Me and him stood together. I would motion to the boys that was doing the line and driving the stakes with the poles. I'd keep them in line, and they measured the distance, the chain. He'd record all this,
Okay.
and we'd turn an angle. I had to know how much to put the guide wire down to brace the poles. All that was different. And so that's basically what we done.
How old were you about this time?
Oh, I was 16, 17, 18, I don't know, long in there.
Yeah.
And so then, but the REA had a company man that went along and cleared the right of way with these farmers,
Okay.
where we could go through their property, drive these stakes, where you want your light pole in the yard and all that. This was paperwork. At the end of the day, they would turn this paperwork into the REA, and the engineers in there would, or the draftsman would spice it and know what was going on out there. So we worked around here for a long time doing that, and then.
And I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what it was you were doing. Right? This was a big deal. This was the first time electricity was brought here. Right? We didn't cover it, but Ken, you're 94 years young, right? And so you're one of the people that worked on a crew for the electric co-ops that were just kind of becoming a thing to bring electricity to the rural areas through here, right? That's what you were doing.
Right.
It wasn't just this regular 9 to 5 like that. You were. This was a new chapter in the life of the area, of the community, and you had a hand in that. That's pretty. Did you have a grasp for what it was you were doing at the time, or you were just
I was just going blind to it,
Yeah.
And of course I studied the book and picked up, and Lee Round, the bookkeeper, he was good, and so after we kind of got through Polk County, they sent us to Lebanon, and we did the same thing out of Lebanon.
Wow.
Worked out of Lebanon around in that county.
Yeah.
Got done there, and then we ended up in Jeff City and done a little work. So one whole summer there, we were busy on the road with our little 4-man crew and our
16, 17 years old. You're traveling across the state.
Yeah, we're
putting electricity in
driving stakes up and down the road and go into your yard where you want your light pole. Well, put a stake there, and it was marked.
Yeah.
Tom Kinsey was the stake driver. He'd ride on there, and Prentice Hancock, he was one of the chainmen. So that was our crew.
Wow.
And
that's something. That's a huge moment for the area. There, whether I think it's one of those things probably taken for granted now, but that before you there was not that, right? And so that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, it was
a cool story. But so your experience as a surveyor, then that you kind of hung on to that, right? And that gave you many more opportunities. In the military, how did that happen? Did you enlist, or were you drafted?
Well, that was in my records, when I was in service, and so that helped me in the service because when I was overseas, mainly that I used that because I was in Airways and Air Communication Service. And we didn't go out and survey then, but I could read a map, and could plot stuff.
Yeah.
Or if they wanted to drop some supplies over here in this canyon or that, you could coordinate it to where it was, where to do it. And it was just a matter of shuffling paperwork on all of that.
Yeah.
I didn't go out in the hills and do any of that, but that was just part of the.
Well, how long were you in the service?
I was in 4 years, well, not quite 4.
Not quite 4. And that was your job when you were in the service there too? Did you enjoy your time in the service?
Well, yeah, I did. It was pretty educational. It wasn't something I had to do. See, back then they was doing the draft.
Yeah.
And they, so you...
Were you drafted, or did you volunteer?
My draft number come up, and so my older brother, 2 years older than me, he was in Korea. He was one of the first ones over there.
Oh, okay.
And then my time come up, and he had just got back. And before he got back, he said, if you can don't get any other type of service. He said it's cold,
Yeah.
and this is not no fun place over here.
Yeah.
And so I had a chance. So there was 3 or 4 of us boys. We all had to go at the same time, and we all 4 volunteered.
Yeah.
And so we got 3 of us got in the Air Force.
Okay.
Had to do a little political work to get it done. Long story, but I ended up getting the Air Force. And if I hadn't volunteered the next day, I would have went in the Army.
Yeah.
So I went that close.
Yeah. Wow.
But they pulled my number out. I was lucky.
Wow. And how old were you then?
Oh, I was just 19.
19. Yeah. Okay. So you served your 4 years in the service, and then you came home, or where'd you go?
Yeah, I ended up discharged. I was in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
I was at Andrews Air Force Base.
Okay.
In the engineering department.
Okay.
And and then when I was discharged, I come back to Bolivar and lived here just a short time. And then I wanted to go to California where the big money was. I heard. So that's what I done, and I did. So I didn't stay in Bolivar.
Okay.
I went to California.
So let's fast forward a little bit and maybe get to the years of the Penguin right now. So I'm skipping a lot. You can feel free to add whatever you'd like in, but fast forward. So what brought you back to Bolivar, or why did you choose to come to Bolivar, and then how did you get involved with the Penguin?
Well, what brought me back to Bolivar was when I worked for Shell Oil Company for 8 years after I went to California.
Okay.
And
surveying.
Well, I wanted to make big money, and so when I landed in California, that was the oil boom.
Okay.
I landed in Ventura, California. I no job to get a job, and the biggest money to make in the oil fields then was roughnecking.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's what I done.
Wow.
I started roughnecking on a Shell's big rigs.
So tell us what roughnecking is for the people that don't know.
I worked on the floor. If you these big derricks. So I worked on the floor, and they had a big set of, I call them tongs. When you're coming out of the hole, well, they got to screw them in, going in, or break them loose coming out. I'd swing that on there. If they're going in the hole, I'd pull the trigger, it'd tighten it up, and then I'd back it off. And it was a big piece of equipment, as big around as that fan.
Wow.
Heavy, and hung on a big cable, and they had to swing that on there. And then, so when it was tight, I'd pull it off and wait till the next one come.
Yeah.
And on the floor, there'd be a guy who would grab them pipes, and they'd stack them. And all this crew on the rig had to work together at time. If anybody didn't do what they're supposed to and got out of time, it was big trouble. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And if you'd done it very long, roughnecking, you'd have a toe off or a finger.
Right.
But it paid $38 a day for 8 hours.
Yeah.
And you could work all the overtime you wanted to.
So you had a week-long training to be a surveyor. How long training did you get to be a roughnecker like that?
About 5 minutes.
That's what I was wondering. About 5 minutes.
Them old boys is working. They told you what to do, and if you couldn't hack it, you wouldn't be very long. But I was bound and determined. I'd do it, and I did. And so I done that for almost a year and a half.
Wow.
And one day a car pulled up out there, and the guy got out and come up and talked to the head driller. And at the time I had a little slack time, they were drilling. And this guy wanted to talk to me, went out the car. He said, "We've been going through your papers," and said, you had some survey experience, and said, "We'd like to talk to you downtown at the main office."
Wow.
So I went down there the next day, and they said, "We're going to start up 2 survey crews." They were doing a lot of wildcat and wells back at that time. And you've got a lot of experience on a transit, you know. So would you like? So we'll pay you the same wages as roughnecking
Wow.
to do this. So that kind of got my attention.
Yeah.
So
I've seen
yeah,
that.
I was seeing I wasn't going on that roughnecking about as far as you could go.
Yeah, your body
So
break out.
so I took the job. So they started the crew up, and so we had a station wagon, and I got the job as the instrument man, and we had a guy called the party chief. He was the bookkeeper, an older man. We had a station wagon, and what we done, they was drilling a lot of new wells. Well, to survey it had to be legally. You go down drilling a well, it had to be right.
Yeah.
There wasn't no guesswork. Well, it was out on that corner.
Yeah.
You had to file this to courthouse. Pretty technical.
Yeah.
A lot worse than doing that line work, surveying a straight line.
Yeah.
So I done that, and I learned a lot there. Done a lot of plane table surveying and everything. And so I done that several years. And then I worked out of Bakersfield. I left Ventura with Shell, and then they shipped me. My crew went up to Bakersfield to their main headquarters, and they was doing a lot of wildcat welling up there. And we'd go up in the mountains and survey these wells out. And it might take us 2 weeks to do all the paperwork and get ready to even start to find where they wanted to put this well, because we was working with the geologist. So it was a lot of red tape to all this.
Yeah.
And going back to where I got interested in the Penguin was through the oil business. In Bakersfield, the main highway went right through the middle of town. And we'd go uptown and loaf around some, shopping around. But there's this one drive-in right in the middle of town, right above this highway. And I remember this tall, red-headed lady run it. And I'd drive up there in front, and I sat there and watch that operation. And cars would pull up in line, and they'd run up this one window and hand them a sack of something, food, and they'd tear off. And I sat there and watch that, but there's all women working in there at these windows. So I went in, got up nerve one day, and I went in and asked this lady about this operation. She says, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm selling hamburgers, so many for $1 or a sack full for so much money." And these people a lot of people running from San Francisco to Los Angeles back and forth. And they just ran and get a big sack of hamburgers and off they go.
Yeah.
Boy, that was interesting. And I noticed there's all women working there.
Yeah.
So I watched that a while and I asked her, I said, "I'd just like to come in here and watch you into your operation." Somebody just stand back and watch. Well, she was a good heart, and she let me do it.
Okay.
And I watched them women, how they were being that so fast.
Yeah.
And how they operated fascinated me. And I said, I believe I can do that. I talked her into letting me try to fry the hamburgers,
Really?
to do it. I know it had to be fast.
Yeah.
But the grill was as big as that door there. You could put 3 dozen or 4 hamburgers on there at a time.
Yeah.
And they had it a system. And I watched that, and I worked there for a little bit on off time and do that. So that's where I got the idea of a drive-in for business.
Again, something else that wouldn't happen these days. Come on around the counter.
Yeah.
You want to try try the job out? Like that's wow. You've had it's amazing the turns that I think life takes us through. But you're raised on a farm near Aldrich, and somebody comes up and says who's interested, and you thought you were going to be clearing out a fence row of brush.
Yeah.
And where that ballooned to, and all the different experiences, and now we're fast forwarded. Now we're to the Penguin. So you had the idea of the Penguin.
Yeah.
How did it come about, though?
Well, I had some vacation time coming up, and had the oil company. Then I was at Bakersfield, California, and of course I had a home there and everything, Yeah. And so they was gonna start in this pipeline, Shell and Texaco together from Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they was going to send a survey crew to Alaska. Well, I had the two little girls at the time. They were little.
Yeah.
And my wife at the time, I mean, the company was sent me.
Yeah.
All expenses paid, big promotion.
Yeah.
She wasn't going to go.
Oh, man.
So
Alaska's beautiful.
So I had to make a point and make a decision, you know.
Yeah.
So I said, I can't go. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I come back here on vacation. So I just kept working for Shell. But I went to work and I did work as a survey crew. I went to work, had a pickup truck, and I drove around and checked these oil wells, keep records on them.
Yeah.
But then I had vacation, so I come back here on vacation, and my dad told me he knew the Elmer Tosh, the old man that owned it.
Yeah. The Tosh family is the one who started the big one?
They was the one who started.
Okay.
And he said they won't sell that. And so, you know, I always thought, here I am, you know, and I wasn't going to Alaska, and I didn't want to work out there in that oil field, what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I got interested in it. So I went up and talked to Helmer, and he said, I'd sell it, you know. And I said, well, you know, I believe I could. I'd like to do that, but I've got to go back to California and quit my job, and got to sell a home and everything. And if I buy this, why can you sit here and run it for me till I get back? And so he agreed, and so we got that all straightened out, and I went back to California and got the house sold and everything. And it took me a while to get all that. And then I come back, and then I got back and took that over. So
what was it like coming back here at the time from California, but coming back to what made you, I know the Penguin you said made you come back, but was there something else that
well, of course, all my folks is here and all of hers is here, and so I've been on the road for several years, you know, with service and everything. So it's kind of good to come back, and I always wanted a business of my own. In the back of my mind, I always promised myself, by the time I was 30 years old, I was going to own my own business of some kind. Yeah. And I was 30 years old.
Okay. So is that everything, the stars aligned there? Everything was right there. Okay.
And so anyway.
And this was early 60.
Yeah, this is early 60s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where I got started, and I just basically walked into it, and then I had his help that was there, which they staged, you know, that was just help to me, because, you know, and then it took me a while, and he didn't stay with me very long.
What a difference in industry. Like you're checking, you know, oil rigs or pumps or what, you know, you're in the oil field, and then next thing you know, you're behind a griddle, you know, or trying to run a restaurant. Right. Just a very different industry. Did you hit the ground running, or was it rough at first?
I hit it running pretty good, but because I knew from experience I had on that little in Bakersfield, you had to be fast, you know what you was doing, and you had to keep your mind on what you was doing. Yeah. So it was a lot but to own it and have to help. Yeah. You know, you got all these employees, and you got a lot on your mind, and so. And for 30 years old, I was pretty young, probably and I wasn't an educated man at all, you know. So I was
feeling a lot of education.
I was feeling my way through everything. Yeah. So, and I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes, but the people here, the majority of them kind of knew me as a kid, and so it was easy to get plenty of help. Older people would come looking for work, and And so it didn't be long to get the hang of it.
Yeah. And you said earlier before we started filming, you said you're 30 years old when you bought it, and so you could kind of speak the language or relate to some of the younger ones who were your car hops and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you still you mentioned a story? I don't know if you want to share it again, but you had a car hop that used to work for you approach you, and how often do you get that or hear about that?
I get that a lot. I can be out. My lady friend, the lady I've dated for several years, we'll be out just a normal Springfield shopping or here around anywhere, and somebody will just walk up and say, and she said, "Well, who was that?" Well, they used to work for me. They were grown up and retired. So you get that nowadays. I get that nowadays, just like that.
Which kind of, I don't know, does it make you feel it's rewarding? I would think.
Well, yeah, it is. You think that
years ago you made an impression on them that much.
Well, the thing on being kids, so many of them, they were all their first job they ever had and made money.
Yeah.
I can give you an example. Alan Hines is a retired highway patrolman. He worked for me at the Penguin. He worked inside, and here, well, they have here at high school, they have banquets once in a while. They have one once a year where they sponsor one class, so it goes way back, But it happened to be, and they'd sell tickets, and then you go and have a dinner. So I went to this one time, and I remember the year of the class they were sponsoring it that year. And the speaker, they said, here tonight, they announced it, is Alan Hines. So he was highway patrolman, and he gets up, and I'm sitting there, across, and he went through the history growing up here as a kid in Bolivar, working, and he said, the first money I ever made and the first job I ever had was off that guy sitting right there, pointing to me, kind of embarrassed me. But, he remembered that. The first money he ever made, it, all of them was that way. And I can tell you kids' names here that worked for me, and they'll flag me down anywhere and say, but we've told our kids that we work for you and what we done.
Oh, yeah.
And at the Speedway, and that was a whole different operation in the Penguin. But
so, and I want to do that too. But because I've heard people, they knew I was going to be talking to you, and they've messaged me going, "Oh, I used to love that place," or "I was a car hop there." Bill Brashears comes to mind. He said he was a car hop there at some point. I don't know if it was when you owned it or before, but the Penguin seems like it was this almost this historic landmark of a place. I remember when they opened McDonald's here, and people were sleeping out overnight. Like, it was a big deal. I can only imagine what the Penguin must have been. What was an evening like? Like, what was a Friday night at the Penguin like?
Okay, Friday. Of course, summer is your big time, Well, I had the evening. You usually had your families that would come with the little and toddlers, going to ice cream or whatever they get. And of course, we had trays we put on the window to set the food on you. Okay, well, I kind of get the family trade early in the evening. As it went up around 8 or 8:30, that part would kind of die down, but then you get the younger bunch coming in. And then back in those days, a lot of the boys and girls both, when they graduated around like from Stockton and halfway in Buffalo, they'd work in Kansas City. Well, those people would get off work in Kansas City maybe 5 o'clock. Time they got around, but they all wanted to come to Bolivar for the weekend, come home.
Wow.
And so along about 9 o'clock or 9:30, you got all these drag racers and all the hot rodders coming in, and then business really picked up.
I bet.
I mean, the traffic from the square running, and business, it was a busy place.
Business and shenanigans,
right?
I think
That's right.
Is what picked up. Somebody described it. In fact, I think it was Bill Brashears described it as it was American graffiti before American graffiti. Like, it was just that kind of kind of a place. And we don't want to get anybody in trouble, but it was just it was a historic kind of a landmark place that still sits near and dear to their hearts. You talked about ice cream, and somebody told me that you were the first person to bring soft serve ice cream to Bolivar. Was that a thing you were chasing, or did that just happen? Or
Elmer Tosh, he'd had this put in this soft ice cream machine when I bought it, and so of course I used that for milkshakes there, and I bought my mix from Foremost. I could get their ice cream mix from them out of Springfield.
Okay.
So I just dump that in there, and that was kind of my project, taking care of that, because that was high maintenance on that. But the kids could run it and do that. But I mean, I took care of keeping it clean and everything, what you're supposed to do. But and then but like Bill McCoy and Donnie Steinschauer and all these kids that work for me, they can run it. They know what to do. I trained them all, and but the teenagers, and then the boys that had the jobs would come to Kansas City. They're the ones that had the hot rod cars, and they'd gather out there, and they'd I'd hear their conversation. Well, I've got a 305, or I've got this in mine, or I've done this to it, or I'm, and as the night went on, they kept building up, and when it really died down, about after I kind of got it closed, that's when the action would start. And so
somebody shared. You mentioned after it closed, somebody shared, and I don't have it on me now, but they messaged on Facebook, and they said she was apparently at SBU in one of the dorms, and after hours or something, you or somebody you had would deliver burgers and things over to SBU, which probably was not very common in that day.
Well, they closed their cafeterias. They didn't have food to eat, I mean, they do, of course, now, but then they didn't. And so a lot of them used to walk from the dorms up there in the evening, get up there before dark, or some of them after dark, and they'd be 3 or 4 or 5, 6 of them in a bunch, and they'd get stuff to eat and order some sack stuff and take it back.
Yeah.
So as it got colder, of course, a lot of my business would drop down.
Yeah.
So I come up with the plan. I said, well, I went to the dorms, the boys' dorm, and I went to the girls, and I said I got permission from the college to put a menu up in their room, where not in the kids' room, but down to the main office of the menu. And if you want an order, I'll deliver it to you, but I want this menu, but I got to have some rules.
Yeah.
I said, you go around how many want an order. Yeah. It's going to be delivered from time to certain time, and I'll deliver it. And all I want to know is what you want. And when you get this box of food, you'll know how much money my driver needs to get.
Yeah.
I don't know who's getting who. You can figure that out. It'll be wrote down the way you want. And so that's what I done. And, that picked up. And boy, you'd be surprised at stuff.
Yeah.
But Danny Steinschauer and Bill McCoy, I had an old pickup truck, and I'd sit that in a box in the seat, and they'd take it down here. And in fact, I've got some pictures, and I've got a sheet here I'll let you read that Bill McCoy wrote to me.
Okay.
And he could tell you all that stuff. It's like it was.
That's cutting edge at the time.
Yeah. So when I sold that, I told the people that bought it, I said, now in the wintertime, if you want to continue that, that's worth your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
To do it. And those college kids really appreciated that.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I mean, they'd order several hot dogs and hamburgers,
Well, sure.
and milkshake and stuff, and they had their name on it. And they got that box of stuff, they'd be there to grab it.
Okay.
They knew what they were supposed to get. So, you got to kind of use...
It's creative marketing.
I guess. But, so,
And now, were you the owner of the Penguin when you hooked up with the Speedway to do the concessions?
No, I'd sold it.
Okay, so after the Penguin, then you started to do that, or how did that?
Well, the reason I sold the Penguin, I'll get back to that. My wife and I, we divorced it. She wasn't there very long.
Yeah.
And I was there by myself for, that was it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was there 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And I don't know, heard Dr. Kuhn?
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's back in my time.
Yeah.
He was my doctor. And
Ben
Kuhn.
Yeah.
And my health was failing me pretty bad. And he come to me. I went to him one day and he sent me this. So I'm going to tell you something. If you don't get alive and get out of that penguin, you're going to die. I weighed 140 pounds.
Wow.
And he said, you're just working yourself to death. So here it was, winter time.
Yeah.
Coming on. So Sandra McKinney, who had worked for me inside all these years,
yeah,
her folks is the one that bought the penguin from me.
Okay.
So I said to Sandra, she could run the place. Her and Bill McCoy and Danny Sanchar, three could run it if I had to be gone for a little bit there. I told to Sandra, I said, Sandra, I told her what Dr. Kuhn told me. I said, I can't sell this now. I've got to winter it. You can't sell the drive in the winter coming on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the spring, I can. If I can make it through the winter, I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
And she had in the back of her mind something going on that I didn't know about. She went and told her folks that Ken's going to say he's going to sell it. They was up the next day to see me.
Oh, wow.
And so that's how come they bought it. They bought it right then.
Wow.
So,
Did you stay working there for any amount of time after
well,
that?
Sandra could run it as good as I could. Yeah, I stayed there.
Yeah.
Or, while I kind of went through it with them, got them going.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew the family anyway, all of them. So that's how come I got out of it then.
Yeah. Were the car hops, and this is a random question, but I thought of it. Was it the roller skates and things like that?
No, I didn't have roller skates.
They didn't do that.
No.
Well, my wife, she worked at Sonic for a little bit. She was a roller skate person.
Right.
But I didn't know if that was a...
No, we didn't have roller skates.
You see that?
No, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So,
liability. Yeah.
So that's kind of the story of the penguin now.
And then, so how long was the penguin open after you sold it?
I have no idea. Once I sold it, this may sound funny, but once I sold it, I never recall ever going back there again.
Oh, wow.
Because I mean to eat or anything. Yeah. I just, when I was done with it, I was done with it. I just did.
Makes sense.
But because it was running, they was experiencing. Yeah. No need me hanging around. But
well, I've seen pictures of, and I think Beth sent me a picture of a menu that used to hang in the penguin.
Yeah.
But there's not very many pictures.
No, there wasn't. I've got a picture there that I'll show it to you there.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put it on the video too.
But now to get started at the racetrack, I was done with all that fast food business. Well, of course, I'll not go into the history of the racetrack. That's a long, long story. But getting to the food part of it, some businessmen here in town bought it.
Okay.
And so I'm in Springfield. I've sold a penguin. I'm already working for Ozark Grocery Company. Okay. I'm a salesman.
Yeah.
Okay. And I got a job and I'm going and living in Springfield.
Yeah.
Single.
Okay.
And I get a phone call and they said, one of these businessmen, one of the buyers, knew all about the penguin, all know me all my life. So we want to talk to you. So we met at a restaurant in Springfield.
Yeah.
And here was these guys, and I can give you their names if you want them, but I'll not go into that right now. You'd probably know them all.
Okay.
Well, a couple of them are dead now, 3. But anyway, they said, we've got this speedway out here, and we're car people.
Yeah.
I mean, we're big in that racing.
Yeah.
But we don't know nothing about that food end of it. And we want you, we know you know all about that. Yeah. We want you to do that. And I said, I don't want nothing to do with it. Got up and walked out.
Wow.
I said, I don't want to do with it. I got a job. I'm single now. I've got a different life.
Yeah.
Dr. Kuhn told me to get a life, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I I left. A few days went on again. I got another call, same bunch of guys. And they said, listen, we've talked this over, said, you need to do this. I said, there's any amount of people around Bolivar, probably his families or older women can do that out there. Nothing to it at all.
Yeah.
You know, anybody can run a restaurant and do that. No, we want you. We want you. All of them.
Yeah.
Well, they just aggravated to death. Finally, I thought, well, I studied about it and I said, well, it's only one night.
One night a week?
One night a week. And I knew the setup. I'd been out to the car races. I knew all about it. I knew what was in there. And I thought it over. I can buy everything I need from myself. I got the grocery company.
That's right.
I can get all the refrigeration I want extra if I need it.
Yeah.
Off of these trucks, refrigerated trucks, to pull down to the racetrack. So I come up with a figure of what it would cost them to hire me to do that. And I said, before I go to any details, I'm going to tell you it's going to cost you a lot of money for me to do that. So you be the judge when I tell you. Yeah. And sometime there's no need of me telling you about this now, how I done it and why I done it. But I mean, they said you've got the job.
Wow. I was talking to Linda Bunch the other day, and she said that she used to run around, of course, with Beth, but she worked for you out there at the concession stand, and she said we made $3 a night, something like that, $3 a night, and the candy and burger or whatever. And she said, I thought I was rich. I thought I was rich. And like, what a gig that was. So you kind of had the same experience, I guess. Yeah. Hiring the younger ones and helping them. Right. That's I would assume that's rewarding. Yeah. To hear stories like that too.
Another thing about the help that worked for me, Bud Engelman was superintendent of schools. Yeah. And he lived right behind me at the Penguin. And he went to the car races a lot too. And Mr. Engelman told me one time, he said, all them kids that worked for you at the Penguin and at the racetrack, I kind of knew them, and I seen them in school. He said that kids really talked a lot about that. Yeah. And how much it helped them. He said, I noticed on how they could meet and mingle with other kids and with adults, And he noticed that, but I didn't, but he did. So that was kind of rewarding to know that somebody like him, he was proud of them kids.
Notice of that.
And there was just very few places for him to work that time. But
the Speedway at the time, and if you're in Bolivar now and you see the Speedway and it's like, what's the big deal? But in that day, it was an event. Right? Oh yeah, it was a big deal.
You bet you.
It was a full. Maybe can you describe what race night was maybe like? Was it pretty packed there?
Oh yeah, they would. Of course, I'd be out there all Saturday. Yeah, I'd be out there at noon. I mean, I had to be out there to set frozen stuff out to unthaw for the night. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time out there before anything ever started happening. But the race cars would start coming in, and they'd be out there working on the track and everything. A lot of going on, but and a lot of times it was getting in my way in my operation, but I had to work through it. But anyway, there'd be cars parked all over the place out there, and the reason I had to go early and get my help there, it didn't take me long to figure out. You in those concession stands like that Speedway, you'll do half of your food business before the race ever starts.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense. Everybody wants to get their food and get to their seat.
Because I noticed I'd be out there and I'd be kind of kids coming, kind of doing this, and everybody first thing there would be 8 or 10 people. Well, we want something to eat, so I'll change my time. So I'd bring them in an hour earlier. Yeah. And we'd be set for it. So it'd take me long to figure that out. popcorn to popping, cotton candy, and everything going. And so
that's great.
I
could smell it when you're describing it.
Yeah,
and that was good.
And so, but again, I had a lot of good help, and I worked a lot of people there because they see I had two little different buildings. As you come into Speedway, you had to walk between these two buildings, and each one had doors you raise up, and I had two girls at each door, so there'd be about 6 people at each one of them buildings.
Yeah.
One, and so it was quite an operation, really.
I bet.
And so, but then when the race got started, of course, people they wanted to get their food, get their seat, and get set up. And then some of them would come back and get their stuff. And then we'd always have a big intermission. Then there'd just be people standing, you just can't imagine.
Yeah.
And so it was quite an operation.
How long did you do that?
I've done that for 2 years.
Okay. And now race season it's not an all year thing, right?
No, that was just on Saturday night. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears because I just had a thought. I heard, and you can confirm or deny this, but I heard you had a hand in a couple of the different romantic relationships from a couple of prominent families in the Roberts and the Womacs here in town. And the story with Ruth and is it JV Womack there, and how they went off and eloped, and you were a good best friend and kept your mouth shut. There's truth to that?
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear that. And I think there's a lot of people that probably love to hear it. But and then with Roberts being able to take sweet talk him into taking a brand new Chevy on a date. Is that right?
Bill Roberts.
So maybe do you care to expound on those?
Yeah, I can tell you that if you want to listen to it.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Well, JV lived out here on the farm with his aunt and uncle, and of course, he's my age.
Yeah.
Now out there on T Highway, it was everybody out there had girls, and it was my JV and Robert Kiefer lived out there. You know the Kiefer.
Yeah.
And Frank Diggerson and JV and myself. We was all the same age. So anyway, it was at high school. JV played saxophone.
Okay.
And of course Ruth lives here in town. They were dating. He was a freshman, and I guess they both were freshmen. And of course I grew up with JV, all the way, went to grade school, and all that. We were good buddies. Well, evidently Ruth's dad didn't want her dating. That's natural. So JV, he confided in me, and he'd tell me everything. He told me, one time he said, "By George, we're going to run off and get married." And I thought he was teasing me, but he wasn't.
And Ruth is Spurgeon, right? Harlan Spurgeon's sister, who was a preacher here at First Baptist, is that right? And then SBU or Southwest Baptist College? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, so we're all aware of the families that play here. We were all in the same class of 49.
Okay, so.
And how old are they?
16? 17, 18. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, he told me how they're going to do it. He said, we're going to run off a certain date. And the way they're going to do it, nobody's going to know it. Now, Ruth had a girlfriend, and she knew it.
Yeah.
And Ruth, I forget what her horn she played, was pretty big something.
Yeah.
So that you kept your instruments at home. So JV, he packed some clothes, took his saxophone out, put it under the bed, packed his clothes in the case.
Yeah.
She done the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, the day they're going to run off, they come packing their cases in. Yeah. Normal, get on the bus. The bus goes on, and they walked down the street down there, down below the old high school, called a taxi down to Humansville, or called a bus or something down there, and went to this town out in Kansas. Well, Betty, and she knew it, and I knew it.
So just the four of you knew it.
Just as four of us saw it do it.
Yeah, and school
that was
over,
it.
And nope, and
the school bus come home. JV wasn't on the school bus, and then it went on, and I, of course, I knew it, and I just lived the next farm on down the road. And
yeah.
Of course, JV, they was milking a lot of cows. He had chores to do. He didn't show up, and I don't think anything was said that night. But the next day, still no sign of him. Well, then began to get, so they went to the high school.
Yeah.
Parents, what's going on? Well, enough kids knew, their friends knew. So I'm in the classroom, and the superintendent comes in, marches me down in the office, and I guess in the back of my mind, I probably knew it was about that, but yet I didn't. I was scared to death of Priester. Anyway, they lined us, me and her, I got us together and started quizzing us, and we didn't. I'll give credit for, I don't know if Betty's still living or not. Ruth is. She's still living. But boy, we didn't squeal. I mean, we don't know nothing.
You claimed ignorance?
We don't know anything about it. So finally, they got enough of us there and kicked us out. Well, it went on, through the next day, and finally, I think maybe, I'm not sure on that, but one of them, I think, called one of the parents.
Okay.
I mean, they'd already went out and had a preacher set up, and had got married and everything. They had it all set, but we're there. So then the parents took it from there.
Oh, wow.
But I tell you, it got pretty hairy there for a couple of days on that, but we survived it all.
Did they come back and finish school?
Yeah, they both come back here, and
did they get a house?
Oh no, they stayed out there quite a while.
Oh, okay.
But they eventually ended up back here. And I remember JV then went to work, and that's when he went in the monument business.
Yeah,
he went to work for the guy that owned it here, and he worked for him for a while, learned the business, and then bought him out. And then it went from there. So.
Which became Womack Monuments.
Right.
Yeah. Wow, that's something. And that's, as a parent, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it would have been.
To hear as a kid shenanigans, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And so I think the perspectives are different. What about the Bill Roberts one?
Well, Bill Roberts he came to me one day, and
this is Bill Jr.
Bill Jr.
Yeah.
He come to me one day and said, I want to talk to you about a deal. Said, was having, it might have been what they call the athletic banquet. That's all the time having something at school. Said, and they have a king and a queen and all. It's a big deal. I want to go to that, and he was dating his wife at the time. He hadn't been dating her too long. And I'd like to go to that. Well, I had driver's license, everything. I had an old car, but he said, what I'd like to do, I'd like to take her to this deal.
Yeah.
And he said, but of course he wasn't 16 yet. So he said, I think I can get a car if I get you to drive it for me. Now, if you know the story, how tight Bill and Agnes was, I mean, you don't pull nothing on them. And I remember I about half scared of it because I'd heard, boy, they pinch pennies.
Yeah.
I can get a car and to go. So I said, well, I don't know. I guess I could. Well, I had a little girl here in town. I was kind of dating a little bit, which they knew.
Yeah.
So I said, you get a date and I'll get the third. And if I can get a car and you drive us, we'll go to that.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've had it all set. So I got with my little gal and got that set up. So I come into town, and I figured he's going to get me a used car. I had a lot of them, a lot full of them. I know I'd have a decent car. Do you know what I had from the brought me out. I'd drive a brand new 1948 Chevy Fleet Line, two-tone, them big wide white walls,
Wow.
but stick shift on the steering wheel at that
Okay.
time.
Yeah. So
You know?
did he have I assume he had approval to?
Yeah, these folks had to approve of that car.
Wow.
And I loaded them in that. And we went to that and had a big
Were
time.
you nervous driving?
I guess I probably was, but I made it all right. And then I stayed, when I brought them home, then I spent the night with Bill Jr. there, with him and his brother. And I spent the night there.
Yeah.
But Bill, for years, we'd be out in front of his wife. He'd tell it, "This is my driver here." We done this, That was quite a deal back then.
That's something.
But the thing that really surprised me is for his mom and dad to trust that good of a new car with me, kids,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they must put a lot of trust in me for some reason.
Yeah.
So that was that story.
That's something.
And he still today, he brings that up. He got a big kick out telling that. If you go over there today and talk to Bill Jr., he'd tell you that story.
Yeah.
He'd tell you,
He's he's another one of those guys that's just a fixture in the community. You always know Bill Jr. But so let me ask you the question. So why do you call Bolivar home then?
I just know everybody, and then all the kids I grew up with, they're married and had kids, and you just kind of filter back in all of them, and and so then there's and as far as traveling, I got a lot of that out of my system in the service, and and I. So I've never always liked to take a vacation. I never wanted to go overseas or somewhere to some foreign country. And I can go on vacation, go to Colorado, or I'd go back to California once in a while, and I enjoyed plenty to see around here without running all over the world.
That's
and
right.
You never know what you're going to run into. So, and then, like I said, I've been single most of my life. So,
do you still have family farm?
No.
Anywhere near Aldrich?
I don't own anything anymore. I've had at one time here. I had 80 acres. I joined Bill Bob Kallenbach out here, 80 acres, and I built a new house out here on Lemon Road. Built it to do it. Had 5 acres and a horse barn on it. Fixed it all up and never did live in it myself. Got it all done, and I sold it to a lady wanted it, and then I've had 2 other houses here in town, and so I just trade and do this and that place in Springfield one time, and moved around and just anything make a dollar. And, tried. Then I got in the horse business and got hooked up doing this work out here on the Saddle Club. You want to hear about that?
Tell me, how did that happen? And
I was when I had this place, this acreage out here, this 5 acres I built on everything. When I retired, I was going to move there.
Okay.
I was going to move there, as it, and not single, but that's where I would end up. My dad was a retired farmer, and he built the house for me and everything.
Wow. And
he done all that for me. Well, I was going to move down here, and Paul Butler had this farm out here, Pleasant Hope. I don't know if you ever knew that place he had. Well, do you know where it's built right across from the post office, that big white house, that barn.
Okay.
I lived there 20-some years.
Okay.
Well, I was going to move down here on my own. And I run into old Paul Butler, and he told me, he said, "What are you doing down here?" And I said, I was getting into this horse business, and he said, "I want you to live out here on my farm out here. I've got that." And he said, "I want you to live out there in that house." He said, "There's that big barn's got so many stalls." And he cried around. I didn't want to live out in Brighton. Make a long story short, he finally called me and said, "Well, I'll live out there a little bit, and I was,
Yeah.
of course, I'd been selling groceries for years,
Yeah.
and I was kind of thinking about getting ready to quit that. Then I'm getting up some age on me, and so I lived out there and out there and kept that going, and so anyway, I got in that horse business, and so I joined the saddle club out here.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I got in that foxtrotting business.
Yeah.
Got to showing them, fooling with them, Well, had those concessions, and we'd have some horse shows through the year, but our big one's always 4th of July.
Okay.
And of course, being in the concession business, they put me in charge of that right quick.
Sure. Yeah.
They used to have hot dogs and hamburgers and all that stuff, But a lot of the desserts, the people that belonged to the club a lot of them would bake pies or a cobbler and bring, and we'd sell it, just bring money in anything.
Yeah.
So I kind of ramrodded that, and I had two. And so then I eventually, since I was kind of hanging around there so much, so eventually they got me vice president. They'd vote you in, And then they moved me up finally to president.
Wow.
And by then you had to kind of run the place when you was president. You had a little authority. Well, I'd do the buying for the concession from a company I was working for.
Yeah.
So I had a good deal there. It wasn't much of a problem for me to handle that end of it. So but my cooks I had out there, I had an outdoor grill. Now, I don't know if you know Jim Hacker. Do you know him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Matt, the banker, Hindenburg was my cooks. Okay. They go over here to halfway to the, oh boy, it makes a cement place, and made Jim Hacker, and they bought one of them big feeders, cement feeders for cattle.
Wow.
And they set it out in the back of the concession. You can go out there, it's still out there. They don't use it anymore, but it's out. And it's got a roof over it. And they were my cooks, and they were good. And they showed up every time. And so they were my cooks, and they'd sit out there and throw them hamburgers and hot dogs on there. And we had a big crowd out there. That was quite a deal too. But and then the help would bring in some of the kids that worked with them, And so we had pretty good operation going on out there. And I'd done that for a long time. And finally I just got so old, like so much going on, I couldn't handle it anymore. But so for several years in there, I know I've got it somewhere, a plaque that they made, it's the Speedway, that I had sold more hot dogs than there's anybody in the state of Missouri. Give me a big
plaque for that?
Yeah, I don't know where it is. I used to have that around. So, but
interesting, the twists that life brings, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and
what an experience.
But I always wish I'd made a book of some of that stuff. But probably where I learned more about being around people was my experience working with the people at the Penguin, meeting the public, and at the Speedway, and everything. Because when I went to the grocery sale, I was selling institutional foods, just hospitals and schools. And Johnny Westfall got me on. If you're the Westfall family, you hear of Morris Westfall.
No.
That's another story. I'll tell you that. But anyway, Johnny had Bolivar Candy Tobacco Company here.
Okay.
And he just sold stuff around at the service stations and restaurants.
Was the Candy and Tobacco Company right on Broadway?
No, it was right down here where, it was down here where the furniture sits out all the time.
Yeah,
that was the building at Bolivar
That's
Candy
what I
Company.
thought.
So he told me then, he said, after I'd sold the Penman and all that, he said that Ozark Grocery is going to start up an institutional division in Springfield.
Okay.
And this was a new type business at that time.
Yeah.
They were retail, selling grocery stores. And they had 3 grocery stores that are owned in Springfield called Ralph Brown grocery stores.
Mm.
So they said they're going to start that section. You go up there, and said Jack Farthing owns that, and they build that unit. You can get a job there selling because you know that type of business, from all that.
Yeah.
So I done that. Make a long story short, they were building it.
Yeah.
But they didn't quite have it ready. So he said, "You come to work tomorrow." They put me out there kind of selling to these Ralph Brown stores.
Yeah.
It was retail. Well, I learned all the retail business from doing that for a while. Then they opened that up that I went on the road.
Wow.
And so...
You've lived a life.
Yeah.
You have lots of great experiences.
So I have sold on that, and I've done that for 30 years.
Yeah.
Well, really 35. But
Wow.
So that I quit doing that, and the reason I liked that, I think back, I went to a different route every day.
Yeah.
I went to Lebanon, was my day to work Lebanon on Tuesday for 28 years. That was Tuesday.
Wow.
I'd leave Springfield, work my way up all the towns, schools, hospitals, some restaurants, and then I'd stay there overnight. I'd go on up to Raleigh, up in there, but then on Wednesday, I'd go back down through Stockton and all back in there.
Oh wow!
In other words, it didn't get boring to me because I only went to those customers only once a week, and I'd make from 18 to 25 stops a day.
Okay. Yeah.
Every day. And so you had to keep moving to make it.
You didn't have time to get
and so every time you left a customer, it'd be a different one. The next one would be the lady at the school, or it'd be a restaurant, be different type.
Yeah.
And I was sold like to Tantera, the Lodge of Four Seasons, all them. I was up in worked them lakes and all that over them years.
Yeah.
So I've thought back years ago. I don't know how I'd done all that, but I put a lot of miles on the car and on myself. But it never got boring to me. I guess I never did get bored.
Well, maybe that's one of the secrets to life, right? Like you're stay moving, just keep going.
So it was, I know you. That's getting a long ways from the story about the penguin, but
that's okay.
But that was kind of the thing that brought me back here. And once I got here and got hooked in, I just kept digging from here to there, and finally got too old to do anything. So
you have 2 daughters?
Yeah. So,
okay. Any other boys or just the 2 girls, huh?
Just a lot of,
I know Beth is here.
Yeah, she's,
Yeah. What about your other?
She lives in Springfield.
Okay.
She retired from, she worked for most of her life, State Farm.
Okay.
And her husband retired, and they live out by the airport out in Springfield. Yeah, they're both, she's 70 years old.
Okay.
And they retired. And
what about grandkids?
I've got, Beth had all figured up. I don't know. I got several.
Okay. Do you get to see your family quite a bit?
Oh, yeah. I see them a lot. Yeah, they're all good. I always say if you can look at that picture right there, that was taken down here when I was 92 years old, that picture.
Yeah.
And all of them, there was in there, the little ones and big ones. That's my bunch. That's what's, from me, that's since I come back got out of service, that's accumulated that bunch.
Yeah.
As Eddie looked at it, Beth, they looked at it and they said, you see what you brought in here, that whole bunch there.
We'll take a picture of it and I'll put it on the video here.
Yeah, you can. They're all in there. There's Julie lives out of here. She's my Beth, and Katie, them.
Yeah. Katie's been giving me a lot of information about you on Facebook.
Oh, bless you,
Yeah.
Lord. I hope they don't put this on there. And if you look right there on top, is a picture that Katie made. She told me, and I told her what to do.
Yeah.
Now there's that letter.
Yeah, from Bill McCoy.
If you still got this going, or
yeah.
oh,
yeah.
okay, all right. This is a letter that Katie got in touch with Bill McCoy.
Okay.
And Bill sent on his phone, Katie's phone, this letter. That's what Bill wrote about the penguin. Now you can read that. There's some on the back.
Yeah.
Now you can read that. A lot.
I'm going to take a picture of it.
You can read that.
And I want to say Katie sent this to me. I think
she may have. Now, but anyway, I drew that. That's a penguin. I drew it up.
Oh, okay.
That's basically the way it looked. And over here was a shed, and you could drive cars under that. Of course, she put the penguin. But I had this little pickup. If you see, it says penguin drive in on it.
Yeah.
It was black, just like that. It was a 49.
So they would drive in. There were no intercoms.
No.
They just watched for you.
They just went out to the car and they told you what they wanted.
That'd be something. And you talked about how they hung the food on the window. They quit doing that a while.
Yeah, you had to roll the window up about that far, and you just hang that hook over it, and they'd set their food on that.
Yeah.
Then the car hop would pick it up,
Well, this is something here too. I'll take a picture of these and we can put them on.
Now, when I was reading that, she put on here that my dad built that. Now, my dad told me that was for sale because he had been working on it. And I said, well, I guess my dad, he loved to lay them cement block. That's what that's made of. Now, I think you said
to Charlie Woods.
Yeah, that is
Charlie Woods.
I never. That's news to me. I didn't know. I knew Charlie Woods' dad.
Yeah, well, I won't tell Charlie that. We'll cut that out.
But I can't imagine Charlie. He's lived three lives. Charlie, I knew all three of them. But anyway, yeah, you can read that.
Okay.
And it's some of that is.
I'll get a picture.
But Katie fixed that up for me.
Okay, looks like she's taking care of you.
Yeah.
She's doing a good job.
Yeah, she's,
Well, is there anything else you want we didn't cover that you're hoping we cover or anything? Or
this, like I say, I wish I wrote could win a lot of details and made me a book to give the great grandkids because, we have get together as a family. Now, Katie is the one of the grandkids that's interested in more stuff. But I used to try to go to all the ball games for all the kids. But I got so old and crippled up. See, this leg right here, that one time they thought they might have to take it off.
Oh, wow.
But I fooled around and saved it. I go out here at the hospital, work out 2 days a week, have for 20-something years.
Yeah.
Man, just keep my leg going. I don't have, this leg is dead. Now I still drive my car and understand something about it. Yeah, you wanted to see my car.
Yeah, let's take a picture with it. Let's see. This is an early 90s Riviera, right?
Well, it's a 98.
Oh, 98, okay.
They quit making them.
Yeah.
And I've had it quite. I didn't buy it new, but I knew the car where it come from, and they see General Motors had Cadillac and the Buicks.
Okay.
And the Buick Riviera and Cadillac was what they called it, a Coupe de Ville or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're fancy sports car.
Yeah.
Well, they got up in the years, so that they tell me on the Buick people said, why'd you quit making it? Because it was a kind of car that older people bought, It was it was rather a sports car, that Riviera is.
Yeah.
And I'd had one before, a 92. This is, like I say, a 98, a different body style, the two.
Okay.
And I was always just a car man.
Yeah.
I always kept a good car. I kept it clean. It was ready to go.
Yeah.
That was just me. So anyway, I ended up and always wanted this one. So I knew about it, and it took me 2 years. Finally, I talked. The lady had it, and I finally got it bought. Anyway, that everybody knows that car in town. There's not another one, and I've only seen one in Springfield.
Okay. Yeah, I want to see it before.
There was a lady up there had a black one, a Chinese lady.
Yeah.
And yeah. So anyway, that's. And in fact, I've got a buyer for this Riviera.
Oh.
I was always going to give it to one of my grandsons.
Yeah.
But he can't handle it. But he could. Of course, he just it's got a factory supercharger on it. And I mean, he'd tear it up. I don't want it to go that way. But I tell you who, I've got his card out there in my car. I think it's been probably a year ago. He told me. I went in to get my battery put in this wristwatch. I can remember jewelry.
Okay, yeah.
Adam, I don't know if you know Adam.
No,
the boy.
No.
Well, he's him and Mom are running it now.
Okay.
Well, Adam must be about 24 years old now. He's about yours high.
Okay.
He's a car guy. I didn't know he was. I've always known him, but I went there to get my battery put in this watch, and he said, his dad died about 2 or 3 years ago. He said, boy, I've been wanting to talk to you, and I really never talked to him much. He said, my dad told me, if you ever watch Ken and that Buick he's got, if ever he trades that in or sells it, you get it and put it in your collection. I didn't know he was collecting any cars.
No.
Boy, I didn't have the idea. And I said, well, he said, if you ever do, I'd sure like a shot at it. I said, well, I've had some people ask me about it. I said, but I have no intentions as long as I don't know how much longer I'm be able to drive, and I don't. Probably not going to be very long. I don't think they're going to give me my license. And that's what I'm afraid of. But anyway, he gave me his card. He said, I want that Buick. So, but he don't want it to drive.
Yeah.
Because he's driving a BMW, I think. He wants to throw a tarp on it. He got a barn somewhere it stores it. A car like that, the shape it's in, will make more money. Just let it get old, and then some old boy walk along with, hey, that's
right.
And this,
it's an investment.
Yeah, it's an investment. So I said, well, there's a dealer in Arkansas that knows that car. And he told me a long time ago, he said, I'll buy that and I'll put it in the showroom floor for a period of time, every time the years of cars change. Okay. I want them to show the difference,
Yeah.
So, but I said, I saw it at him, I said, if you want it, I'll let you know. But I told Beth one time but they don't want to fool it. Now, Beth likes to drive it. She took it to Kansas City.
Oh.
Here a while back, and I think hers in the shop.
Okay.
She drove it up there and said, boy, that thing, you get something going down the road. But anyway.
We'll get a picture of it.
Yeah. I tell you, I'll tell you this story and I'll show you the car. Up there's a picture I got in the horse business.
Oh, okay.
See that picture?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, I raised that horse right out here at Brighton on that farm.
Okay.
And that's me standing in front of it. That's not me on it.
Yeah.
But I always wondered when that's at Ava. You've heard about the horse shows at Ava, haven't you? That's the foxtrotting capital of the world.
I mean, they're still going. They're still doing
Well, that's where that was taken at Ava.
Okay.
And that mare was 3 years old, and I raised her, broke her to ride and everything. But you get into politics and go to Ava.
Yeah.
And I'd go to them horse shows, and me and this horse been hooked up all these people.
Yeah.
Vance Vall out here, him, and all those. We spent a lot of time there. But I always wanted to win a blue ribbon down there. And I had a good foxtrotting mare, and I bred her to a high-powered stud. A friend of mine had it. And she had this mare. And I raised her right out here at Brighton. Well, most of them started showing when they're 2-year-old. But I had enough of them a lot of these trainers break them when they're 2 years old, and they ruin a lot of good horses because their bones are not set up right. They'll ruin their ankles, and they're not good old horses. And usually end up crippled when they're 9 or 10 years old. I wasn't going to do that to that mare. So I didn't even ride her till she become 3. I knew her, and I talked to a vet out here, and he said, she's set up, you can start on her. So I had her broke to ride, and I rode a lot, and I knowed what to do, and I know I could do it, but I had to go buck the politics at that show. Now, that guy on her is Curtis Williams. He's dead now.
Okay.
He was one of the top trainers, and he was also one of the, played in the Ball Knobbers at Branson years ago. He was one of their lead guitar players.
Okay, interesting.
And he was a horse trainer, and anytime he rode a horse at Ava, and he had a horse barn, he had full of horses. He was riding for people, paying him big money to ride them.
Yeah.
But so I told him, Curtis, I got acquainted with him over the years. I said, you know, I've got a little mare that's pretty good. Now, Rex Barham out here, you know Rex. Well, Rex, he was big at Ava. He's the one that got this horse barn out here. And Vance is his grandson. Okay, well, I knew all these people. So I said, I've got this mare, and Rex seen me ride her out here. He said, that's a good mare.
Yeah.
Well, Rex knew what he was talking about. I knew that, so. And Rex was kind of hinting at wanting Vance to ride her, but I wasn't going to go that route. So I went down there, and Curtis, he was riding all the champions down there. I mean, he'd ride against anybody.
Yeah.
And he was good, old boy. So I talked to him. I said, I've got this mare. I'd like for you to look at her. He had a horse barn at Rogersville full of horses. So he said, you load her up and bring her down to me. Let me see her. So I loaded her up one day, and I kept a blanket on her out there in the barn. She was slick. It was fall of the year. So I loaded her. I had my own truck, a horse trailer. I loaded her up, put my blanket on her, had my saddle and everything in the trailer. I go to Rogersville. When I go down to this horse barn, it's kind of the spring of the year, and all these horse trainers was all meeting there and discussing their strategy for the year. And I pulled in and I seen all them people, and here I thought to myself, here an old farm boy, here I broke this old sorrel mare down here with a blanket on her and let her in that horse barn. Here's all these guys. Well, they all kind of knew me, these trainers, because I was hanging around them all the time there. And so I pulled her in there and had that blanket on her. And so I said to Curtis, I said, do you want to ride her? You want me to? He said, oh, you ride her. So I pulled that blanket off of her. Boy, she was slick, and she was perfect shape.
Yeah.
And he stepped back. He said, that boys, right there's what a 3-year-old looked like. He said, look at the muscle he's got on her, that hair coat. And I got to stand in the stall that I'm riding. It's got long hair on them yet and everything, but I had her slicked up. Yeah. And so I want him to ride her. So I threw the saddle on her and the bridle, and I got on her, and you could ride her in that barn. I made a circle around put them in a walk, the foxtrot and the canter. So I just had her walking, and I knew just how to hold her and what to do. And she just went to work, So I'm going in 2 circles. I come out of a turn, and he motioned me over there, and I thought, he's going to tell me to get her out of the barn. He said, I said, well, I was getting ready to let her foxtrot. He said, I've seen enough. He said, that's a good mare. Yeah. I said, well, I was going to let her foxtrot. He said, I was watching her feet. He said, whenever you come out of the turn, I was watching the way she's handling. Said she's using her shoulders, reaching out. And saw that a lot of them, they want to pedal. Yeah. They want to use their knees down. But to do that foxtrot in them gates, they got to use their whole body. And she already knew how to do it. So to make a long story short, I said, well, I put her in the 3-year-old futurity this spring. And I said, I can't go down there and win with her. I ride her in. Yeah. They don't know me, them judges. All of them's out of state. You got 5 judges. They'd show me the gate. But if he's on her, one of them trainers, they're good or they won't be on there, 'cause that's their reputation.
Yeah.
They ain't going to ride a bad horse.
Yeah.
So I took her down there to him. He said, I've got a stud horse here that's going back to the owner in Arkansas, and I'll put her in his stall, and I'll start tuning her up. And we've got about 6 weeks before the horse shows start.
Yeah.
And, and I'll go over and might well change shoes on her or something, different things you can do. So I just unloaded her. I said, and he went to riding her. Well, I had some friends that had some horses down there that I'd run to in Springfield once in a while. Said, we was down to old Curtis's barn the other day. We had a horse down there, and said he gets them out and rides them. And he said, when we get done, he said, now I'm going to show you a good one. And said, he brings out your bear.
Yeah.
And shows them, said, there's what we got to beat.
Yeah, that's the blue ribbon horse there.
Right there. And to make a long story short, he rode her and he won it.
Yeah.
But when they put her in the class, there was an old boy had one there that always wins everything. Jerry Midland from Lebanon had an orange grade mare, same age, 3-year-old. He gonna win everything. And back in this was in '91.
Okay.
When that was taken, that was that year. And he says, and Jerry was telling everybody, all these out of state guys calling in, knew about April Charms going to win everything in '91 in the mare class. So I figured she probably was, So anyway.
What was she called?
Well, her nickname was Peaches. Her registered name was Tom's Touch of Class. The dad's name was Master Tom.
Okay.
Okay. But we called her Peaches. That was... So anyway, some of the trainers got to meet down there on the weekends before the big show starts, and they'd break their horses out and ride. And I'd go down once in a while and just see them ride her, but you'd always leave her to the last to show them. Yeah. But they all liked her, they couldn't help it because she had no problem.
Yeah.
So we go down to the horse show. So they got the mare class when they put them all in there, they had 38 in the class. Wow. That was too many to put on there. That's too many horses. So they said, we're going to split the class up. So they draw numbers. And I thought, when they draw them numbers, they'll draw that gray mare and begin the same class as mine. Mm-hmm. They'd put 20-something in class. And then make her, I figured it might mess me up. But as it happened, they drawed them up and they split them. The gray mare was one class, and she was in one class.
Okay.
Well, they put her in, she won the class. Yeah. So then they had what they call state night. That was the big one, the Saturday night. Okay. That was a week-long show. It was the big night on Saturday night.
Yeah.
Well, the top 5 of all these classes had to put them all in one. So that put the gray mare and her together on the big. So now I'm in really big trouble. So anyway, that's the way it went. Put her in there. And Curtis told me, he said, I can't win first place with her. Said, because they got 5 judges and 3 of them is bought off already. I can't win. But I put on a show. Again, that gray mare. Yeah. So, here it was. So we go in, and he done just what he said. They put on a show. Yeah. But the gray mare didn't win it. Another mare did from Alice State, and she come in second mine. But when they let her out of the ring, I met and Curtis, I was waiting down when he met her out of the ring. I was going to take her down to the stall. Yeah. There was this old man from California, always come to the races, and he's always going down to the barn watching Curtis ride these horses. He owned 2 jewelry stores in California. Okay. In San Diego. And he'd come back here in a big motorhome. I mean, high dollar. Yeah. And I got acquainted with him. I mean, he was a nice old guy. Him and his wife. Well, he loved that mare. When I led her out for that night, that show, and going down to put her in the stall, he followed me down there, him and his wife. And he said to me, he said, "Would you sell that mare?" I said, "No, I wouldn't." But I didn't know what to do with her.
Yeah.
But I had to think fast. He said, my wife loves that mare, and I do too. He said, "I've seen Curtis ride her at the barn." He said, we'd like to buy that mare, take her back to California, and I can show her she's dead broke.
Yeah.
And I don't have to do anything. She's ready to go, and I can take care of her. He said, "I've got a nice place down there in San Diego, and I've got a horse barn and stalls and ready." And so I thought about it. Well, I've got 2 other foxtrotters at home.
Yeah.
I'm not horse poor.
Yeah.
And the time to sell was you got a buyer.
Yeah.
Money was tight. And I priced her high, and he just wrote me a check for her. And they was trying to get a big, I'm not going to tell you about the God for her because you won't believe it. Jack Hacker and Paul Butler, a bunch of these guys, you got that much for that mare. I had to show them the check.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that old man kept that mare, and he hauled her back and forth for several years and showed her here. And he'd take her to St. Louis and ride her. He showed her in California, and she lived. He always get in touch with me, and that mare lived to be. I think she was 28. She finally died in her stall one night.
Wow.
But anyway, but that was 3-year-old when he took. That was Curtis Owner Williams.
Yeah.
And that's so. So I always he bought her, I give her the blue ribbon that she had.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, "I buried that blue ribbon with her."
Oh, that's a good story. That's a good story.
But anyway, that's my horse story.
Yeah.
And here you can see I had other horses.
I saw that too.
There's one. That's a red roan mare. And when I left the farm out here and moved it here, well, I had a back operation.
Okay.
I got 2 steel rods in my lower back.
Yeah.
Said, "No more riding horses, no more playing golf.
Mm.
You break them, you'll go to a wheelchair." And I had a Palomino gelding,
Yeah.
white mane and tail, and I had a dapple gray gelding, both of them, both top horses.
Yeah.
You could ask anybody around here to see me ride. I'd ride them into parades and stuff. The same guy bought them both up in North Missouri, and he was big in field trials, rode them and judged field trials off of them.
Okay.
And and the Palominos, he died now, but he still got the dapple gray. And I used to go up there once a year in October to see him.
Okay. That's good.
But I've got pictures of all of them.
Well, we'll get some pictures of that and that and that and these and throughout the video we'll put the pictures up while you're kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
There. So.
But anyway, I got into too much of my life story about from the panel, but you should weed a lot of that out. But so, but I always said that I always said I must have had a lot of extra help from power up above for me to get through some of that stuff, But I just, I guess another thing. Now I took care of them 2 girls, Beth and Cindy.
Yeah.
They'll. But you can look at that picture. Beth and Cindy both there by me.
Okay.
But anyway,
you've lived a blessed life with lots of experiences. I love the stories and the connections of the people and the families, and I just really appreciate it. And if the series is called "Why Do You Call Bolivar Home?" and what do you appreciate about the community? Again, you've outlined it well. The community's been good, and the people have been good, and
everything always started here.
Yeah. From the family farm near Aldrich, and world traveler, but then you found your way back home here, and so.
Well, right there is that little picture. That's that highway patrol I told lives in Springfield.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now that's Harold Reynolds. He's a retired highway patrol. That picture there is taken. That's me and him in our first cars. That's a 34 Roadster. He took that picture on my 80th birthday.
Okay.
They had me a party, and he gave me that picture. But that was my first car I had.
Yeah.
And how do these kids get these cars?
You're right.
Now, again, how do I get money?
Yeah.
Here I am. I'm 16. All the town boys is dating all the cheerleading girls because they're driving mom and dad's cars.
Right.
I'm an old country boy, and dad ain't gonna let you drive his car. And he lined us 3 boys up. I'll tell you one thing: if you just want a car when you're 16, you better figure out some way to get it, because you're not driving mine. And he demanded. Well, they're here, and I'm wanting to date these little girls, and I ain't got no car. I'm in the tether, you know. Well, so Roy Kukal family lives out. Had a boy in my class. We got busted and got together. We got to figure out ways to money. Now, we could go out and chop thistles for Joe Martin for 50 cents a day, me and JV. Now, but for 50 cents, you go to the show.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't getting nowhere. So Dad wouldn't, we milking a lot of cows. And so this Kukal boy, Roy, come to me. He said, we got to get some money. He said, out here in the fence road, there's an old Ford car. I've been working on it for 2 years, and I've got it running. He said, let's go to Kansas to wheat harvest. Well, I approached Dad. I want to go to Kansas to wheat harvest. Well, you can't bother. And make a long story short, Roy, he said, I got it running. And my dad and my brothers said, they let me go. And we can drive that old car. We'll go to Kiowa, Kansas. Of course, that's where everybody was going. And we could hear the older boys talking about going to Kiowa, drive a wheat harvest. Well, we can do that. So he gets the old car going. And Dad finally I pleaded with him. He'd give me $20. I had to help to buy gas to get there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd pay it back too.
Yeah.
So we got in that old car and struck out, and it used so much oil. We took a 3-gallon can of used oil and set in the trunk, and every little bit we just pour a little more in, and it leaves a steady stream of smoke. And once in a while it almost quit running. We could have walked to Kiowa quicker than we drove, but we made it. And we pulled into Kiowa, Kansas. Was a little town about like Aldridge, and it was nothing but people, kids, boys, looking for work, hitchhiking, every way in the world. Town was full. And we come limping through town in that old car, and we said, how are we going to get a job driving a combine? Look at this.
Yeah.
And we don't know who to see. We don't know nothing. We're in Kiowa. We drove plumb through town, and there was a swimming pool down there, a bunch of kids around. At the end of the swimming pool was a big old tree. And we pulled that old car up under that shade tree. It was getting pretty warm weather.
Yeah.
And we got out and we looked the situation over. We said, well, I don't know if we can make it back home if we got enough money again or not. So while we sitting there on that car fender, all at once a big car come driving by real slow and stopped and sat there in the car for a while. We was sitting out on the fenders, this old car.
Yeah.
And he walked up and said, are you boys looking for work? And we said, yeah. And I remember he had a brand new pair of striped overalls. He said, I'll need a couple of guys. I've got a place out town here about 3 miles, and I've got a place fixed up for help, and everything. And I need a couple of guys. He said, would you be interested? He said, pay $10 a day, room and board. We knew that's what they paid.
Yeah.
Well, that's big money. Well, we got on that. He said, if you want to, you just follow me out there and we'll go. So we fired the old car up and we made it. And it was one of the nicest looking places. You'd want big, nice white house. And he had the basement fixed for walk in the yard, the backyard.
Yeah.
It was fixed up. You live there, bed, showers. And his wife had a pair of newly little twin girls, about a year old. Well, I had twin sisters. I kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Now he said, I'm going to tell you something. It's wheat is a little bit 2 weeks before it's ripe. but I'm in the hay business. He had a big open hay barn out there, and he had some nice looking equipment sitting around. You can tell he had money. You can tell. So we had it made, and he said, "Now, if you boys want to work, you can move in here now. We got plenty to do. We'll go do some hay. We're going to bale alfalfa." And he said, then we put that alfalfa in this barn, and I've got buyers that come in here from out of state and buy a lot of this hay. We said, we can do that. So we got the haying done, and they went out there, and he said, now, he said he had a brand new truck sitting there, had a grain bed on it and everything. Yeah. He said, I need one of you boys to drive this grain truck, and here set 3 combines. And one of you can drive the combine. There was one of these combines brand new. He said, that new one I'm going to drive. But the other was maybe a year or two old.
Yeah,
It was,
still good.
It doesn't drive. Well, I said, but Roy, he said, he's kind of a truck man. In fact, he's retired from a trucking outfit now, Kansas City. He said, I'll drive the truck. And his job was out in the field when you're coming, you unload it, and he'd take it to the bin or to the silo.
Yeah.
And so we got the hand done. He said, we're going to cut wheat around here for a while. I've got people I work for. But when I get done here, we load up, and I hit the road, and I do some more work. To make a long story short, that's what we've done. And we ended up and got done there in Kansas. When it come time to quit, we had to quit and come back to go to school.
Yeah.
We was in Guyman, Oklahoma. That's where we ended up. I said, I drove that combine from Kansas, pumped into Oklahoma. And, he never once told me where to grease it, all I had to do, I had carried 2 extra sickles on my combine.
Yeah.
And they had to roll in front, but they had these,
Wow.
It was Case brand. And I'm sitting up there now. I thought I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
But I knew enough, been around equipment, old stuff that Dad had, to keep them belts tight, to keep them where you could keep them tight, keep cinch on them. We wouldn't throw them off. I sharpened my own signals, done the greasing on that combine. In other words, he said, it's yours. Just take care of it. If you don't, that'd be the end of you.
Yeah.
But I knowed what to do. He didn't have to tell. And he said, I watched you before you ever started cutting. Give you a grease gun. You just went around and grease gun them combines and miss a one. He said, I told my wife when I seen them 2 boys sitting on them fenders at that Missouri plate, them country boys.
They know what they're doing.
So that's what got us the job in Kiowa.
Oh, that's good.
So going back again, sometimes you don't want to give up too quick,
No.
But another deal we made with him, and he was good enough to do it. Don't pay us. You're giving us $10 a day. We don't want no money. We come to work.
Yeah.
And he agreed to it. And he gave us a little tablet. We carried it with us in our shirt or something. We'd write down, have the days, and once in a while it'd rain, but if we'd work, he still paid us. We didn't get paid but we work on Sunday and cutting. When you started harvest, you worked all the time.
Yeah.
And you'd work till night till they got too tough to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we got all done and got back to home, got our old car going again, went to the bank, and he had these. The bank gave him some of them pouches, and he went in. He counted. He had our time was the same, and he had them bankers count that out in cash, put it in them, and give it to us. Well, we've had pockets, but it was worried, man. We'd get stopped this old car, all this money. We hid that money in that old car. We got back to Bolivar, that little Ford coupe there.
Yeah.
I walked into Bill Roberts. This is my connection with old Agnes.
Okay.
And, I had that cash, and I walked up, and one of the mechanics there, Pony Regan, him and his wife had this little roadster. And he had bought a new Chevy car, and he traded that in on just 2 or 3 days before that.
Wow.
Because anybody in town would like to have that roadster.
Yeah.
Because it had a later model motor in it. He had it fixed up. It was 81. I know Agnes had to deal with her. I said, I want that little roadster. And she said, You won't have enough money to buy that. I just unzipped that bag, started counting it out.
How much you buy it for?
I bought it for $400.
$400. Yeah.
How
And
much
what a
did you
story.
make that summer?
You know, I don't remember how much I did when I got that all cut, but I had enough money left. My brother at home, he'd talk Dad in while I was gone. He needed something of his own, and Dad gave him 2-acre patch down to foot of hill somewhere, and he could drive Dad's old tractor. He'd plow that and put it in corn. So he had a good crap of corn there. But I bought it, went to the auction out here from from your buddy there, old Robert,
Yeah.
and bought an old sow about ready to have pigs. Brought her in there at that farm, and she had a whole slug of pigs. I had there, and she raised him out. And I told brother, I said, you got that corn? He gathered that corn, put it in the crib, and fed them pigs out. And so I give him we split half the money on the pigs, and plus I saved one of the pigs and gave Mom and Dad for a meat hog, and had the old sow left. We all had money
Wow.
out of that crap of corn. So it's funny how but Dad raised us boys up. You got to do something.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
lucky, So
Well, you didn't just sit around. You were chasing it.
well,
You were working
I don't
for
know. We didn't know what we was doing half the time. We was doing something. Lord mercy, back.
Well, let me actually, I think that's a good segue too. So whether you're looking for a farm like Mr. Ken Bruce grew up on, or something in the city looking to buy or sell, give me a call. I'd love to help you out. Matt Griswold, Neighborhood Real Estate. Till next time.